Salutiamo con tanta gioia, affetto e riconoscenza il Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi, che è con noi. Buon pomeriggio.
Good afternoon, everybody. Let's now start this session. I would like to present the moderators of this afternoon. We have President of this session, Professor Consuelo Corradi, from the Libera Università Maria Assunta of Rome, and as a moderator, second moderator, we have the Professor Susy Zanardo from the Università Europea of Rome. Good afternoon. I also want to greet everyone who is following us from all over the world. Good afternoon, everybody. Let's now start working on a theoretical part of our work. We've been very concrete and practical so far, talking about the meeting with the youth, while with the intervention, the speech of Cardinal Ravasi, we will deal with the interpretation and the reflection on the big challenges. As I'm always very proud to be sitting at a table, the same table of Cardinal Ravasi, and I would like to give the floor to Professor Zanardo for a short introduction. Thank you, Professor Corrado. Good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon to all following us remotely. Before introducing with great joy Cardinal Ravasi, let's explain again the afternoon's program. So now we will watch the video that you have already watched before regarding the youth. Then we will listen to the speech of Cardinal Ravasi. Then we will discuss about your insights. So after his speech, we can talk and discuss, because he has a meeting outside, so he has to leave us at 5:30 this afternoon. So we will be very fast. We will have our debate. After that, we will have a break, and the working groups and the reflection groups will remain here so that we can exchange our insights, our ideas, based on what has been said in the morning through the 5 different continents, and this afternoon's intervention of Cardinal Ravasi. In these cases, we always used to say there's no need to introduce such an important person. Okay, but it's an emotion for me to introduce him. Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi is president of the Pontifical Consiglio della Cultura. He was the president of the Pontifical Council of Culture till yesterday. Oh, sorry, I'm starting with a mistake already. I have to apologize. Whatever I will say now, it's for sure the truth. He is an intellectual, a great humanist, an archaeologist, a theologist, an expert of the Bible and the Jewish world. His research and his scientific and divulgative production is enormous. Hundreds of articles and volumes regarding biblical issues, but also literal issues and scientific issues. His works are much welcomed all over the world thanks to his great wisdom and the wonderful way of writing and the international and the interdisciplinary horizon. He belongs to almost 20 Italian and international academies. He was awarded many times and almost 20 degrees honoris causa. So, I will not read any of these titles, otherwise we would be listening to these degree titles until 6 this afternoon. So welcome, heartfelt welcome, Cardinal Ravasi, and thank you for being here. I would like to say a few words, which I believe it's important for you, for this audience, which is a female audience. I'm sorry for the male audience, but I think it's most important for female audience. Cardinal Ravasi, since 2012, has worked a lot, and I have worked on the wake of Cardinal Ravasi in order to increase the female presence in the Catholic Church, to enhance it, and to give to this the proper light, to bring it under a proper light, meaning the role of female, the female role in this reality. So he created the feminine consultation of a Pontifical Council of Culture, where he has been working till a few days back. This is an extremely important element. I think it was a novelty and a news in the Roman Curia. And I just wanted to remind you all that he was a great innovator, besides all the other things. Now I can give you the floor.
Il desiderio di essere contemporanei dei giovani ci spinge ad affrontare le trasformazioni attuali, interpretando i diversi volti della generazione di cui intendiamo prenderci cura. La chiamano Z, la generazione degli adolescenti di questi anni, cresciuti durante una recessione globale, la guerra, il terrorismo, le pandemie. Non conoscono confini tra realtà fisica e digitale. Vivono on life. Il digitale è un ambiente in cui passare tempo, incontrare persone, scambiare conoscenze ed esperienze, compiere scelte personali lasciandosi ispirare dagli influencer. Hanno bisogno di apparire unici. Ricercano il consenso attraverso punti di vista inediti e contenuti social popolari. Da questi dipende l'essere o meno accettati e l'appartenenza a un gruppo di amici. La curiosità è il motore per nuove esperienze. Esplorano il mondo e le culture senza preconcetti o limiti. Per crescere, formarsi, riflettere, lavorare. Ai canoni imposti preferiscono la diversità e l'inclusione. È stata definita come la generazione gender fluid. Quando parlano di sessualità, non amano identificarsi secondo gli schemi tradizionali. Solidali e sensibili al bene comune, sono sostenibili. Rispetto alle precedenti generazioni, sono più attenti all'ecologia, alle disuguaglianze sociali e agli impatti delle singole azioni sull'intera comunità. In famiglia, senza la necessaria confidenza, sono figli vulnerabili. Dialogano poco, distrattamente, di temi esistenziali e delle difficoltà psicologiche della loro età. La ricerca sul senso della vita la sperimentano con una fede disaggregata. Partecipano alle pratiche religiose come meglio credono, ma senza impegno formale o continuo. Desiderano una ricerca esperienziale, con riserve sull'idea di evangelizzazione tradizionale. La scuola resta sempre il presidio educativo più importante. Ma le emergenze globali di questi anni hanno reso l'apprendimento più difficile e aumentato i fenomeni di dispersione scolastica. Per il mercato del lavoro devono essere multitasking. Hanno fame di competenze digitali e filtrano contenuti in 8 secondi per decidere cosa rappresenti valore e interesse. Usano tecnologie moderne nella vita privata e si aspettano di farlo anche quando lavoreranno. Le sfide culturali che i giovani ci pongono sono complesse, trasversali, ma una risorsa per il futuro. Aprono a nuove possibilità e sfaccettature per comprendere l'umano. Educare richiede il coraggio di farsi compagni di viaggio, testimoni di speranza. È regalare orizzonti e non confini, come hanno fatto Don Bosco e Madre Mazzarello.
I would like to start as well by thanking for such a welcoming that was such feisty, and also the chance that I'm finding myself among women. And for the very reasons Professor Corradi was reminding us, she was the coordinator, the president of this working group in two different phases, and she has constantly been an important presence in the dicastery that I was the head of it until yesterday. And as maybe you read in some newspapers, I had another, the dicastery has another director, and two dicasteries now are together. Because I reached, I'm 80 years old, and therefore my hope is to go back to the past, a past that where I used to research and study. Even if I will, of course, remain involved in many other institutions. And I also thank of being so welcome in such a grand profile that you have dedicated to me. And it's true that I have really a long journey, a long path behind me. I had so many occasions all around the world, meeting so many figures and so many FMAs. And also I had the chance of meeting and being in contact with the Salesian Pontifical University. And for the very reason I said before, I'm mentioning the transition that we are living through. I have a meeting in a while later on to follow up this transfer of powers in a certain way. And my follower is I met some times ago. He's Portuguese. He came in Rome and he met me because he used to read my books. He's an expert of exegesis. So I really contributed that he could transform himself from Portuguese into Roman. And he was also, his figure really is very powerful, and conquered also Pope Francis, that he completely convinced that this person could direct the dicastery. And so I'm glad that I can entrust my 15-year-old task of directing the dicastery to him. I have the title that was assigned to me. It was given to me. It was on a geometrical structure, that is the polyhedron. As you know, the polyhedron is difficult to be delimited because it has so many faces. And it's true that we can say that there's a statement that say that truth is one, but has so many faces. And we can see only some faces of the polyhedron. So in this map that is not complete, I try to simplify, and I will try, therefore, to make introduce the issue, and then I will depict two great, huge sections. So the introduction is this. we living, you saw that video, and was very much suggestive because portrays the new generation, the generation that is a continuum, is constantly changing. But this is an aspect that I was always interested in, beyond the chapter of female culture and young culture, and that's why I built up the youth consultancy. And the professor next to me helped me also to build up this dialogue between believers and not believers. So this phenomena of the relation between believers and not believers, it's overt among the youth, the young population. So we have so many criticalities, but at the same time we have to acknowledge that the positive aspects are also very numerous. I will highlight, of course, the criticalities, but the ones that really involved us very much. But we have also not only negative aspects, but also positive aspects. Therefore, the temptation should not be, even if it's not seldom that it occurs, the temptation of deprecation of the world, the criticizing the world in which we are, and the temptation of to retire ourselves in close world. So it's some words. And I always try to get over this temptation. I was also the temptation of being entrust ourselves to the past that actually turned out to be a myth. We are in a culture that is rich of challenges, also for the faith, but it has at the same time a lot of resources, and the youngs are the ones who are entailed, they have such resources. If you think about the solidarity, volunteering, the breath for freedom, the progress also of the science, more in a general, broader view, the progress of the victory against some syndromes, and the authenticity that also, if they are a minority, can witness the values and their truth, their faith. So my introduction is exactly this. We should try to have a positive view, a dialogue view, not trying to push aside that world. So this is really a call that has to address a different world, society, school. I will start with the first picture. So, and this is represents the general horizon. Yes, I will highlight, yes, the negative elements, but at the same time, they stimulate us to commit as believers, but also as culture operators. The first picture, I would give a title to the paradigm shift. And I would like also remind you 4 paradigm shift, because by simplifying, I will refer to the 4 cardinals points. There are many topics that are fascinating. What is actually the multiculturalism, and is the right position of different culture? If we think about globalization and localization, as we know in our days, so blatant, so with sovereign and so and another topic is the polytheism of values, ethical and values, and so from one side, syncretism, and also the fundamentalism as an expression of a religious culture. So the first cardinal points, I tell you them straight away. The first is anthropology. Anthropology per se. The second is the society. Then the third is religion. And fourth, I will leave it to you. Ecology, the attention given to the environment, the Laudato Si, the care for the creation. So the first point, anthropology. Now, I would like to, first of all, start from a sort of experience, immediate experience, phenomenal experience, a phenomenon direct, which entails spontaneity as well. And then we confront ourselves also with phenomena that are very much different. For example, the fragmented self that is very much linked to the emotions, what is very gratifying. And then we can also think about the linear accumulation of things, on a linear accumulation of things, more than a deepening of the meanings. Think about a society that societies are trying to meet, especially among the young people, all the needs, but at the same time to switch off desires. The Italian word desiderio is really emblematic. Desideribus. It refers to the stars, seribus, to infinitum, and therefore it rule out all the more ample ideas. If you think in the past how rights and rights and duties were lived, also the distrust for future, the tiredness, frustration. If we also have a kind of walk through in the contemporary world of contemporary anthropology, the personal life is saturated of consumption and at the same time is empty. So is spiritually extinct, and so there are some forms that are nourishing, the narcissism, for example, being auto-referential, self-referential. Think about the self. There's really a self-referentials. The head cuffs, there is a kind of goggle on the eyes just to be, and talk about the group, the standardized group. Think about the disco that is emblematic of a series of unities. They are coordinating among them, but they are substantially isolated. And think about also these phenomena. We should think also to adverse effect, so the rejection, the protests for its own sake, the bullying, verbal violence, iconic violence. You can see on the social, we can encounter a lot of such violence. And also the faults of our society, the suicides. Therefore, this is a phenomenon that we should not ignore, like, for example, drug addiction as well. This doesn't cancel all the positive aspects. Pascal was always right when he said means that mankind exceeds himself. It has always the highest level, also when he has terrible falls. But in order to explain such phenomena, in the past we had other different forms. In order to explain them, we have to recur, and this is a fundamental element I would like to give you for our reflection. It is a problem that I always, very often at the Cortile of the Gentili, between believers and non-believers. And this is for the contemporary culture, we have no longer a concept of human nature that is shared. In the past, it was obvious. For centuries, we kept on going with the principle Thomistic Aristotelic. That means, in Latin, ontology, the structure, precedes the ontology. It's a consequence. Moral consequence. And of course, this objectivity, it's over. It's melted down in a liquidity, absolute liquidity. Fluidity. When this objectivity was, by simplifying, by Kant, that put the subject the centers by saying you should. Kant was saying the final piece of the critical, the practical reasons. The stars is above me, and the sea in the sky, and there's a moral rule within me. So he acknowledged that in the subject there was always an object, and today it's really very much difficult to keep on having this concept. Was clear, now is fluid, variegated. And this is something similar that is occurring for the concept of truth. For in the classical period, truth was an element was preceding us and was over us. The Phaedron by Plato, the very famous run in the plateau of the true. So like two horses that were running. We are like that two horses. We are running that plateau, and by finding out always new and new views, that meant that the fundamental element of the person was the search for truth. And by recalling always Plato and the youth, I had a great passion for the Greek language. I was in a high school, at the classical high school, classical studies. Socrates, which was the sentence that in complex to translated. A life without research doesn't merit to be lived. You understand the research of the truth. So the religious concept, God is truth. It's an infinitive, eternal truth. And we keep on finding out part of it. So this concept was dominating for centuries, and now, instead, as you all know, the truth, please think about it, the extreme excess. Also in the Oxford English definition, there is the item post-truth. So it isn't a contradiction. That's a falsity that by kept on repeating it, it turns out to be truth. So I do not address, by remaining in this line, many thinkers asserted, one of them is an American one, asserted truth in a, it's like a web that a spider intertwines. If the spider has its nets and has his fellow next to him with his web, they do not clash. If the wind would blow and break these nets, what could do a spider? He would probably build once again the net. So a truth is a kind of elaboration. They shouldn't contrast, should in the horizon. So we are far away from the classical concepts of truth. So this consideration that we have to have on the human nature found one of his best author. I put some notes, footnotes in my remarks. You can find it online. For example, the gender theory. They represent an experimental way the overcome of the metaphysical concept, metaphysical and biological and essentialist concept. Therefore, according to them, the sexes were divided according to some structure, a given structure. And this is a vision, this is the essentialist vision, is pretty limited. The gender theory gives a very positive contribution, in my own opinion, because our own structure is indeed elaborated. They are telling us they are upside down, but has a truth base. The wife of Sars, when she says, you're not born as a woman, but you become a woman. And this is actually true. It's not enough to be just a woman. But now the balances are no longer there. That's why the chapter about the new anthropologies that should be written by having a human basic nature is pretty difficult. If you think some philosophers also all the personalist philosophers are trying to build this concept. Not because we want to deprecate such development. Maternity as well is not just an issue that can be limited to the physiology. Second element that I would like to introduce is the society. Society, and here, as usual, I put some titles, but I would like to express my interpretation. That's a minimal interpretation that is pretty suggestive, maybe, from one sentence of a French philosopher. There's also a theologist, a Protestant theologist, that I really esteem very highly. Paul Ricoeur wrote a wonderful sentence. We said at that time, we're living in an era in which to the bulimia of corresponds the atrophy of the ends. And this was the funds that I was saying before. Let's think about the instruments that we have. At the same time, we are facing a void of sense. So I'm quoting just some topics. The triumph of technocracy mean compared to science. Science is much, much more, is a vision. Maybe if you think about Einstein, he was thinking about the humanist elements. Or if we think the triumph of the finance compared to economy, they are not synonyms. The finance can kill some nations. The economics is the nomos, the law of the oikos of the world, of the home of the world. Okay, and it takes into account of the hunger, of misery, poor, and the bulimia of the means. For example, sexuality, sex. Le Pen is one of the at the same time anoresia of love. So these 3 points are very much intertwined. Sexuality is also the more primitive elements we have, but the capacity of humanity is eros, and eros entails fantasy, vision, love. And then love is the summit. By keeping these 3 elements all together would be great. Instead, we see that is shifted only on one aspect. So skins in contacts, not souls in contacts. Then the bulimia and anorexia, that is virtual, and is a kind of triumph that has become the reality. That is the very end of communication. The Church in the liturgy has one of the most rigorous institutions by keeping this so-called reality. And third is religion, morality. What we are watching now, we are watching many phenomena. One has a dual aspect. On one side, we see the secularization. That is not secularity, something different. Christianity is secular. Our founder was not a priest, was a laity. By talking about Jesus, we are not saying that it was the tribe by Judas. There is no reference to the priesthood. So he was talking, of course, of the biological priesthood. Instead, he was introducing the charismatic, the spiritual element. Well, indeed, this secularity is fundamental. The Church, in the history of the religion, was not always able to keep it and protect it. These elements that were on these topics, on this sentence, was many books were written of it. So Caesar was not Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. So the bureaucracy, the union between throne and altar. So this positive phenomenon of secularity, but at the same time we have secularization. So we has been very well represented by Pope Francis in Evangelii Gaudium, when he says, and then he touched upon another aspect I would like to introduce and highlight: secularization and indifference. Not just a crude negation, but indifference. So the first place is taken by what is occupied by what is external, immediate, visible, fast, superficial, provisional. The real gives way to appearance. And there is the tendency of reducing the belonging to the limiting the faith and church to the private and intimate sphere. With the denial of all transcendence, it has produced a growing ethical deformation, a weakening of the sense of personal and social sin, and a progressive increase in relativism, giving rise to a generalized disorientation. These were his words, and I would like to highlight that such secularization that is now part of the ecclesiastical community created such phenomena of indifference. Indifference is made of superficiality, banality, also. Vulgarity, and sometimes it touches the core concept of God. We no longer live in the epoch of the era of the huge atheism. Let's think about the burden, the presence, bulky presence of Marx, that were very much tied also to Illuminism, some vision tied to Illuminism. We are in a sort of apatheism, without pathos, apathy. So without pathos, the professor, there was this secular age. We had a dialogue. She came to the dicastery. No, sorry, he came to the dicastery, and he was joking, saying, but today, if we would have once again Christ among us and entering and walking through the squares, the destiny probably would be that police force would approach him, would require documents from him, would ask for ID. 4 points, but I leave it to you. The care for the creation, that was for that politicians are indifferent sometimes to some elements, and a huge contribution was acknowledged, that was offered by Pope Francis with Laudato Si. Then we enter to the second part, the second picture. The second picture is a representation of two streams of this anthropology in which we are, anthropological horizon in which we are wrapped up, in which are, so I will only choose registry. I will give only two aspects.
Sono stati oggetto di lunghe riflessioni, e per questo anche mi piace che ci sia
and these two registries were very much debated, and because I'm trying to would like to add something else to what was said in the past, but I'm trying to simplify also issues. The first registro, science and anthropology.
In
this scope, in this
tre esempi concreti.
In this scope, in this issue, I would like to introduce three elements. One is the genetics. I'm coming from the philological world, from a different world, but I let myself conquer when I was at the head of the dicastery of the culture. So the scientific aspect that I was not very much prepared. I studied very much there. Genetics is very much linked to DNA. DNA and his flexibility. The great discovery of DNA was fundamental, and on that base we started to work on DNA when it was revealing elements that were problematic, negative. For example, it was said, but maybe journalists were suggesting some aspect. There are 500 pathologies that can be cured through genetic engineering, which falls within medicine. But, and here comes a humanistic problem, there is the temptation of hubris. That means the intervening by trying to create a new model, a new anthropological model, a new phenotype. And I really had a small chapter at the end of it that was very much essential. Then the aspect of post-transhumanism, that is something that's still very much debated and confused, but is catching up. It's already in the think that there is already that idea in the Faust, Goethe Faust, the dream of Faust of creating. This a dream that comes from the Jewish tradition, the so-called golem. There is also a novel about it. The golem in the Jewish is found only one time in the Bible. The Psalm that is very beautiful, 139. Sing for the immanence and transcendence of God. And in the end, there is the representation of the womb of a woman and the presence of life that is nourishing, is starting. And of course, there, the psalmist said, "Your Lord will sing my golmi," so my golem. And literally means golem means something that is wrapped up. Maybe it was a primitive way to portray the fetus. So something was rolled up, was kind of coiled, something that was. And you already seen how I look up. I was it, and you already read all my thoughts, all that this creature would become, and then it entails the principal finalities. So this is the element of, in a certain way, substituting to the creator, to the creation, with the creation of the golem. It's a hubris. That has always been present in the history, so the hubris element. The neurosciences, this is an element that was repeated. I would like to remind you all, if we would have our skull, we would discover that we have from 80 80 to 100,000 billion of neurons.
Di notte. La stella lattea, la nostra galassia.
Our galaxy, maybe in the galaxy, we have 1 billion stars in our galaxy, so a small galaxy. We are, and the Greeks were right when they were saying that anthropos micros cosmos, the brain is something extraordinary. Think about it, that
questi neuroni,
the links between neurons, so-called synapses, are 1 million of billions. They are all inside our skull. That's why I'm saying that scientific research of neurosciences is an impressive and glorious world that is still at the beginning of its path. But there is a problem. There is a problem, for example, the distinction between mind and brain. In the past, in the history, was clear. So the brain was something that was, mind was something spiritual, and very many people unite those two things, brain and mind. The electrical physicalism, for example, if we proceed through the physicalism path, let's think about all questions and will, conscience, freedom, responsibility, accountability, decisions, the thought, art, religion, and in the last instance, the I, the self. And this is one of the topics that really provoking theology. So in the first so-called first registro, primo registro, from first artificial intelligence, the huge chapter. And also, this is the base for also the post-transhumanism. Grand horizon. It's a grand horizon of this one of the robotics and artificial intelligence. Once it was called robotics. Think about it, what this science is giving to medicine, and also in a problematic sense. Really, it enables to achieve extraordinary results, surgical operation that can be carried out from a physician that is here, and the operation is carried out back in the States. So very complex systems. But let's think about in what two things. Chips in order to ease memory, the bionic eyes, trying to help combat to see also in the night. But it is also a huge contribution to the artificial intelligence, is also for the productivity. Administrative and managerial functions are really warning out. The machines can carry out repetitive things, and therefore it's a help. And let's think about also what can add to the work. But the real philosophical, theological, moral problem lies in the so-called strong artificial intelligence. Namely, the elaboration of a machine, because it's a machine per se, that is endowed with self-conscious. That means that is able to take choices, make choices on following an open algorithm. And this is really very much surprising, because in the very moment the machine decides, just to make you understand in a very brutal way, but it's much, much complex, the issue. It already occurred that the two artificial intelligences were endowed of open algorithm from a linguistic point of view. They invented a language in order to dialogue between each other, and the inventors could not understand the very language where the two artificial intelligence invented. Then let's also think about the film, the drone that is endowed with an artificial intelligence, in which is used to strike and hit terrorism. So there is a precise map of the terrorism centers. The territory is very well delimited. For example, in the desert, where these centers, the machine knows them all, and then the drone is sent there. It must strike one, and he will decide which one. And of course, he keep in his artificial intelligence all the data. Then he decided to opted for one center to be stricken, terrorist centers. And then, of course, you can find also some terrorism. These terrorism are in a tent. So the drone reach out a path. No, sorry, in a path, a young girl walks in a path and takes some vegetable because want to sell vegetables at that tent. Drone, the guy that is supposed to guide plane, maybe in front of such scenario, would strike again. Maybe would be labeled as casualties. But in this way, in this context, what would a machine doing? Would be behave as a man or not? So what would do in front of this scene? The second register. The second overall, let's say, then called register because of overall issue, is, we can say this, that anthropology has profoundly changed, and I'm really the witness of it because I have a long life experience. I consider myself as an archaic generation compared to the today generation. And let's talk about the infosphere. We do know that, and it's a net that crosses all our globe, so-called infosphere. Don't forget that there are always positive aspects to these technological innovations. Till not far ago, 25 years ago, when informatics took gain ground, there was the fundamental idea that was expressed very well by McLuhan, that was saying that we, as a new communication, have created new
per cui I nostri organi si allungano.
The new prosthesis, new enlargement, so telescope, telephone, elongation of. But now we have a different situation. We have no longer a so-called prothesis. The whole environment has changed. An environment in which we have a new anthropological model is developing. And the typical expression, the digital natives, that are rather different from us, that we are digital migrants, that we are, like the migrants, we are talking a broken language. For us, the use of cellular phone, it's really for the youth, the use of the phone, it's part of them. The fact they are working 5-6 hours in front of the PC and they chat is really a new way of communicating, and that's why we do know that we have also we have also the cure of the infobees, the webity. Means the excess of something, and this phenomenon, as once we were saying, no, I don't want to see, for example, watch television, I don't use telephone. Now they are in such an environment that really they have to use it. A church in communication cannot no longer ignore such new technologies, because we have to think also what Christ did, Paul did, and what through centuries the church did by changing constantly its own language. And Jesus Christ is the first, it's a kind of joke, but Jesus Christ is one of those who really used a tweet. I logion, i suddetti
sono le frasi che dal punto di vista storico sono quelle più probabili, dal punto di vista dell'analisi storico-critica,
i so-called sayings. These sayings are the essential, like mottos, like mem. Nowadays we could compare with the mem. If in the evangelical text we have not more than 50 characters, so something less than a tweet. And then we use the parables. They are visual narrations. So, for example, people do know very good the parable of the Good Samaritan, but today people remember far much better the parables. In this light, communication of Jesus Christ was so incisive. Let's think about Paul, that understands that they were supposed to adopt Greek language with a new words. And so he really used the old Greek words with new meanings. And so he adopted the use, he adopted the form of the plane. You see the Roman streets. The Jewish world at that time was much close compared to the Roman ones. So the so-called infosphere implies many problems as well, that they have been studied by many experts, and after according to the religious base that I have, I weighed also the positivity. And let's think about the multiplication of data. The incapacity of being critical, the young guy, if look at an answer online, he will face 20,000 of them. So he should have a critical position, a critical capacity to choose to pick up the right answer. Homologation, standardization, that is created through these new huge systems. And as last, virtuality. Virtuality and virtuality that is actually real for the young people. It's really real, but that implies and takes with it many things like perversion, aggressivity, language pollution, an infinitive little things. I'm tweeting, I don't have such a huge number of followers, 1,000. 110,000 is not such a huge number, but sometimes I read absurd reactions on something banal that was said. So insults, for example. So we can see that very place, the so-called lion of the PC can really express his violence. Now that I talk about infosphere, you can see how really everything turns out to be so complicated. It's really a polyhedron, as I was saying at the very beginning. I would like to remind you, in the end, the witness of a person and what Sil Job said about this topic. He died in 2011, and in 2005 he had held that important conference at the Harvard University. This group of students that were adoring him. Because and he said, and then he wrote it later on, he said that is meaningful because it was said by him and to the young people, by remembering, saying that we have to have the realism of the critical and the optimism of the commitment. I lived his words. Technology. It was an informatics alone is not enough. It is the connection, is the marriage between liberal arts, between science and humanities. So the married, the marrying with technology, liberal arts, and only this marrying is possible to give the very result that make our heart sing. Thank you very much.